Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Abdul Mukhtar. I'm the Director of the Industrial and Trade Development Department at the African Development Bank. On behalf of the United Nations Conference of Trade and Development, UNCTAD, I welcome everyone here to the 7th World Investment Forum, where in this session we'll be discussing entrepreneurship in the new health economy from an African context. We have really a fascinating program for you over the next 1.5 hours. We'll start with 2 opening remarks, and then we have an excellent panel discussion where we'll discuss these issues. So to begin with, I want to invite Ms. Christiane Stepanek, who is the Chief of the Responsible Investments and Partnership Initiatives at UNCTAD, to give introductory remarks. Christiane.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Mukhtar, distinguished panelists. It is a pleasure to open this discussion on entrepreneurship in the new health economy, focusing on Africa. Allow me to please provide you with the background and lay the foundation for this discussion. It is clear that governments in developing countries have increasingly turned to the private sector and market instruments to enhance the efficiency and quality of healthcare provisions, and the pandemic accelerated this dynamic even further. Moreover, in response to the pandemic, new investment incentives to promote telemedicine and e-health applications, as well as incentives for the manufacturing of medical equipment, have been introduced. In fact, digital technologies are already transforming healthcare, from the use of drones to deliver blood products and other medical supplies, to the use of artificial intelligence to give paraplegic patients improved mobility and life quality and develop new medicines. As we will hear from our panel, innovators in Africa are taking advantage of these technological advances. Health tech has become one of the fastest growing tech sector in the region, with an artificial intelligence, telemedicine, and data analytics transforming healthcare, from managing healthcare costs to improving patient diagnosis. Unsurprisingly, private capital investment in the startups active in these sectors has also increased. It is now evident that digital technologies and other types of innovations will play an increasingly important role in health in the years to come. The radical transformation of healthcare sector requires the engagement of all stakeholders, and UNCTAD contributed to improve the foundations of the healthcare ecosystems on many fronts. For a decade now, UNCTAD has conducted several technical cooperation projects in the region in the field of healthcare and entrepreneurship that directly or indirectly impacted the healthcare system and the healthcare ecosystem. The flagship EmpreTech training program of UNCTAD was launched some 30 years ago. The EmpreTech program has now trained more than 100,000 entrepreneurs active in various sectors in healthcare in Africa. UNCTAD has supported the governments of Cameroon, the Gambia, Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, the Seychelles, and now South Africa in the development of their entrepreneurship strategies. To support the development of local production and health industry and capacity building in public health policy, the Investment and Public Health Program was launched in 2017. The program has achieved important results in Africa. Notably, during the World Investment Forum in 2016, Kenya, South Africa, the African Union, the Joint United Nations Program on HIV/AIDS, and UNCTAD signed the Nairobi Statement on Investment in Access to Medicines, undertaking to facilitate investment in pharmaceutical production in Africa. In 2018, UNCTAD's Investment and Public Health Program provided substantive input to the South Africa's intellectual property rights policy. Today is the occasion to offer an overview of the interlinkages between these instruments and streams of technical assistance developed by UNCTAD and its partners in Africa, and to assess what more can be done and needs to be done to support and empower the innovative entrepreneurs of the new health economy in Africa. I now have the pleasure to hand over to our moderator of today, Dr. Mukhtar. And I'm certain that the panel will offer relevant insights to advance our technical assistance and collaboration and intergovernmental work in Africa even further. I thank you, distinguished panelists, dear audience, Dr. Mukhtar, for taking the time to share your expertise with us and the participants of the World Investment Forum. What's left for me to do is to hand over your competent hands. Dr. Mukhtar, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Christian Stefanik, Chief of the Responsible Investments and Partnerships at UNCTAD, for these very powerful opening remarks. Really interesting to see also what UNCTAD has been doing across the continent. 7 countries, development of entrepreneur strategy, touching on so many of the relevant issues, technical assistance, IP, regulatory issues, and all of that, the Nairobi Declaration and all of that. So really nice to hear that UNCTAD is really engaged in this. And I know that going forward, we'll be discussing in details some of this on the panel. So next, invite Ms. Stefania Bonilla. She's with the Economic Affairs Office of UNCTAD to briefly present the results of the survey that UNCTAD conducted recently with investment promotion agencies. Ms. Bonilla, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mukhtar, and it's a pleasure to be here with such an interesting panel. I will try not to take too much of your time because I'm very keen to listen to you all. I think, well, as you know, today we're in the last day of our World Investment Forum, and actually the topic of health has really been quite prominent throughout these 5 days. And I think that reflects on the one hand that it's a priority in our work, and it's a priority in UNCTAD's work because it's a priority for countries, and it's also a priority for businesses increasingly. In our World Investment Report, where we look at the trends of foreign direct investments, what we see is that despite the fact that the pandemic increased the demand for health and the needs for health, investment towards sustainable development goals, including SDG 3, which is the SDG related to health and well-being, has actually decreased. And this is worrying. What we see in our work as well is that at the same time, like I mentioned, governments consider health a priority. And one of the things that they want to do in their national strategies and their economic recovery plans and their stimulus is to attract more investment towards the sector. For some countries, this was already a priority sector, but for other countries, this is a new priority sector. And they're doing this in a challenging environment. So what we did is we surveyed and asked, what are governments doing in this area? How are they trying to attract and promote investment in this new sector? At UNCTAD, we work with a range of investment stakeholders. I work specifically with investment promotion agencies, which have played a key role during the pandemic because they've been intermediaries between the government and the private sector. And their key role has been really to first retain investment. So not promote, but the immediate reaction right after the pandemic was really to retain, to prevent businesses from going bankrupt, to assist them, to support them. And what they also did, interestingly, is that they also supported, for example, in South Africa, the transformation or the expansion into new sectors in support of the pandemic. For example, the manufacturing of ventilators, or the manufacturing of masks, the manufacturing of liquid hand sanitizers, and investment promotion agencies have played a key role in this respect. Now, moving forward, if we want to now attract new investments, we know that some of the key determinants for investment in the health sector are, on the one hand, and especially if we're talking about tele or high-tech health sectors, on the one hand, it's the digital infrastructure of the country, and on the other hand, it's also the access to talent. So we have some interesting examples. For example, in Rwanda, we spoke to a company called Babel Health, who presented in our World Investment Forum on Tuesday. We also had a company, Rocket Health from Uganda. So we really do see this emergence of telemedicine and telehealth emerging in the continent, which is really exciting. I think from our side, what I can say with closing words and what we've seen in our research is investment in the Sustainable Development Goals is particular in the sense that I think it will require a blended finance approach. This is what we've seen. So we need to target, and investment promotion agencies are not just targeting the Oh, somebody muted me. I don't know where I was, but like basically, yes, that we will end with blended finance, and that I think channeling investment towards the health sector would require partnerships between development banks, international organizations, as well as private equity and companies. And that in the end, I think, although we see the market playing an important role, the market cannot do it all. We need to make sure that this investment goes also towards places where perhaps the risk-profit ratio is not as attractive to all investors. And in that sense, the government has an important role. So policy matters, and government has an important role to facilitate this investment, so that we make sure that it goes to the African continent and to the places that are the most vulnerable. Thank you. I hope you caught all of that, even though my mic was muted. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stefania. Sorry about the glitch. I did not mute you. I don't know what happened with it. Must be the technology.
I think we've lost Mr. Mukhtar, but perhaps while we wait for him, let's see if he reconnects. I will wait for him to come back and perhaps introduce you all. I don't know if some of the panelists have something to react in the meanwhile, perhaps to what I've said or to what my colleague Christian, or maybe some of the other events that you've seen during the World Investment Forum and Health today. Ms. Biaruhanga, perhaps?
Just to add on to the examples that you mentioned in some of the countries, like, okay, he's back.
So much, and I'm sure.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Biaruhanga. I'm interested in what you wanted to say.
Mukhtar, we couldn't hear you, Mukhtar.
Hello. Sorry about that. We now move on to the panel, and what we're going to do, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers that are going to discuss and unpack some of these issues that were presented at the opening remarks and the survey that has been discussed. I want to now move on to introduce the panel, but just to say to the audience that this is going to be a really interactive session. We intend a lot of interaction, and it will be Davos style. There will not be presentations by any of the panel members. I will pose questions, about 2 to 3 questions to each of the panel members. Those questions will be answered, and I will expect maybe some interaction as well between the members. At the end of the discussion, we'll leave about 10 minutes or so to the audience to ask questions and to also interact with the panelists. But I encourage all the audience to put in questions that they might have or remarks in the chat box. We'll be monitoring those throughout the session, and we'll be happy to address and have panel members discuss some of those. So without further ado, I want to introduce our really interesting panel group of panelists. The first one is Adereni Abiodun. Adereni is a young social entrepreneur committed to improving maternal and infant health across Nigeria. He's the founder and CEO of a company called Help Mom. Second, Dr. Janet Biaruhanga. She's a qualified medical doctor and public health expert. She joined the African Union in 2017 as a senior program officer of the AU NEPAD Health Program. Third is Nazim Mohammed, who has over 40 years of business experience in the global pharmaceutical sector and is currently advising different organizations as an international pharmaceutical consultant. The fourth panelist is Dr. Onyenoha Chukwumerije. He's a 30-year veteran of the international pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical industry. He founded the company Onyx Pharma, that's headquartered in Lagos, Nigeria. And then last but not the least is Dr. Robert Karanja, who is a co-founder and chief innovation officer of Village Africa and chairman of the Association of Startups and SME Enablers of Kenya. He's a biomedical scientist and development entrepreneur with 20 years experience in STEM and development sectors. So you can see that we have really a panel that really cuts across all the things that we're looking for: public, private partnerships, SME, entrepreneurs, policymakers, regulatory expertise, and international consultants. The objectives of
unfortunately, we lost Abdu Mukhtar again. He was about to introduce the objective of the session, which is really to understand the.
Yes.
Oh, nice to see you back.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I'll fix that in the next few minutes. But so the second objective is really just to prioritize the policy actions that we need to take to support startup and SME operating in the healthcare sector and how they can scale up their innovations across the continent. So without further ado, I will pose a question to all the panelists, not in any particular order. But the key question, just to kick off, is what healthcare challenges does African countries face that require innovative, scalable, and sustainable approaches to health systems reforms? What healthcare challenges does African countries face that require innovative, scalable, and sustainable approaches to healthcare system reforms? So I would like to each of the panel members to really address this question from their own perspective, using maybe specific examples from their own experience, from their work, from their organizations, and from their interactions across the African continent. In no particular order, I will start with, on the screen, Nazim Mohammed. Can you please address that?
Thank you, Abdu. Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be part of this very distinguished panel. I'm sure we'll have some very interesting discussions and later on address some of the questions that come from the audience. I've recently, in the last couple of years, been mentoring a number of very, very exciting, innovative digital health companies here in East Africa, which is my home. And I have to tell you that we have tremendous amount of innovators with a lot of talent, but sadly we also know that a lot of these startup companies don't make it after a few years. And one of the challenges, and which is in the question, is really the ability to scale up. So what I'd like to talk about just for a few minutes is what are those challenges in terms of scaling up, which leads to a lot of failures of what are really very innovative ideas. I mean, for instance, two of the companies that I'm mentoring are, one of the companies is actually looking at a digital way of monitoring neonatals and their respiratory, their heart rates, etc., from a distance. So that would save a lot of nursing time. Another one is looking at faster and more accurate diagnosis of pneumonia, which is really quite an issue. In our region, a lot of children die of it because they're either not diagnosed properly or diagnosed too late. So these are digital devices using AI and blockchain technology, which will make a big difference to our healthcare delivery. But even they are struggling. So in terms of scaling up, one of the biggest problems is that regulatory is a big issue. Although within East Africa, we have a big movement of harmonizing our regulatory agencies around the countries, obviously focusing mostly on medicines. The device regulations are still lagging behind. And what that means is, I'm going to give you a practical example. For instance, in Uganda, one of our company's device was being looked by two different regulatory agencies. The National Bureau of Standards, for instance, and the National Drug Authority. And neither of them were taking really the lead to say, look, we will look at this device. So the result of that was, a lot of delays, which is expensive, which for a startup is really very difficult. So that's just a real example of how, some of the problems we have. Also, I think typically the regulatory agencies are looking at devices as medicines, which really is not very justifiable. They're completely different things. So my perspective is that we need regulatory harmonization. Devices should be seen very differently from the medicines, because they are. Our regulatory agencies are much more sophisticated and mature when it comes to devices, rather medicines, but really not at all mature yet when it comes to devices. So what can we do? And I'm sure Janet will have some interesting views on it from an African Union perspective, of how do we set up a system where countries are looking at a device in one way. So again, another example. So for instance, we've done some clinical studies on one of the devices in Uganda. Now, when we go to Kenya or Ethiopia, we'll have to repeat those clinical studies. That to me really doesn't make sense. We are inhibiting the growth of innovative companies because of bureaucracy, basically, right? If it's worked in clinical studies in Uganda, for sure it's going to work in studies in Ethiopia. I don't think the neonates are that different, right? So that's one issue. The other issue on scalability is one of partnerships. These by definition are young companies with a lot of technical expertise, but not necessarily a lot of commercial expertise, and no single market, at least in our part of Africa, is really big enough for these devices to be sustainable. So they've got to find partners. We who've been in business for many years need to help them, to connect them to partners in other countries, so they can sort of work together and access a much larger market. So Abdu, I'll leave it there. I can talk a lot more, but I'm sure my panelists have much more to add to that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nazim. These are really very helpful comments, and really just drawing on from the example, talking about harmonization, the need to, it just doesn't make sense, what's going on, and really that can be a barrier to innovation. But you've already called out Janet, so I will pass on to Janet in your remarks. So I'll call on Janet then to talk to us, also basically address some question. What are people telling you, Janet? You're the policymaker, what are you hearing about some of these challenges and that innovators face across the continent?
Thank you so much, and thanks, Nazim, for flagging the regulatory systems and the need to harmonize these requirements across at least a regional level or across the entire continent, actually. So in order to make business sense, we need to make the system more fluid. And what you're saying about each country having a different standard that they require for you to put on the market any product is increasingly becoming the challenge most of our entrepreneurs are telling us they're confronted with. And we at the African Union Development Agency, because our mandate requires that we work with the regional economic bodies, and we seek to accelerate integration and this collaborative working approach. We are actually calling upon all of the regulatory bodies to apply what we call reliance. So if there is already an existing instrument, it's important that the other regulators begin to rely on what has already been approved, especially if it has been approved at an international level. There is no need to go through all of that tedious and robust process all over again as a national regulatory body. So we will continue to engage these regulatory bodies, including those ones that are not necessarily medicines. And yes, we do understand that medical devices should not be treated like medicines, because they aren't. And they're not vaccines, they're not medicines. We should be treating them as what they really are. So at the continental level, we have developed guidelines specific to medical, to regulating medical devices. Definitely, you know that medical devices are very wide and very complex area. So we are urging again the various regulatory bodies to use these guidelines, which are produced at continental level. Sometimes it's a question of whether they are ready to utilize these guidelines or whether they have the capacity to do so. So we continue to build capacity of the regulatory bodies that regulate medical devices. In some cases, there's obviously no capacity whatsoever for regulating medical devices, let alone other normal, simpler, generic products that are used in clinics. So again, another effort that we are putting in is with the coming up of the African Medicines Agency. So at a continental level, we will have a continent-wide agency that will complement the national regulatory bodies to do some of those more complex regulations. And we do hope that as many more countries ratify the treaty that establishes this AMA, that we will have it go live and begin to work. And we hope that the regulatory agencies across the continent will support the work of this agency. So I think let me stop it at that with that input regarding especially making the regulatory systems work for our entrepreneurs. Again, maybe I should talk about the issue of accessing finance. So most of the time they have small monies, and the SMEs have expensive, they cannot afford to get into the banks and get cheaper loans. So the high interest rates, and maybe somebody from the bank may have to speak to that, Abdu, we need to make sure that we make some of the priorities that countries have made, make the loans towards businesses in that space quite cheaper, so that the entrepreneurs in that space can be able to access funding. And also at the African Union Development Agency, we try to work with the SMEs to make sure that they are producing, they are preparing project proposals that can be funded by finance institutions. That's another area where we're building capacity of the various SMEs. We have a homegrown solutions accelerator initiative that we have been supporting in the past few months, that is responding and creating resilient healthcare systems, particularly in response to emergencies. So maybe let me stop there and give a chance to Mokhtar to follow up on access to affordable capital for our SMEs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janet, for that really comprehensive. You've actually moved beyond just talking about the challenges, but moving on to some of the policy things and recommendations that need to happen to make this obvious. You know, it's clearly obvious that Africa needs to integrate better. Integration is really critical to supporting these innovations that we're trying to do to create bigger markets and so on. And the AMA, of course, is a welcome development. There is also the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, of course, that is also supposed to integrate markets and so on. So I want to now move to one of the entrepreneurs on the panel and call on Adereni to just talk to us. You know, what are you seeing as a social entrepreneur in Nigeria? You know, what are the challenges you're seeing to scaling up your innovations in healthcare? Adereni?
Thank you very much. So for me, I'm going to come from a part of an entrepreneur. I'm going to come from the angle of a health entrepreneur. And one of the major challenges I tend to see all the time that really affects a lot of health entrepreneurs to scale is funding. And I will come in two areas. The first one is that when you are lucky enough as an entrepreneur to get funding from maybe big companies like, let's say, Google, Facebook, they are always project-based. What do I mean by project-based? They're always attached to a project and to a milestone. And that doesn't give room for innovation. That doesn't give room for flexible innovation and flexible things coming out of your company, because you get a funding now. Let's say you get a funding today, and the next 1 year you have to do a project just to get to a milestone. During that next 1 year, you are focused on that project, and that really affects you to focus on other things that can help you scale as a company. And because of the limited funding accessible to health entrepreneurs, that is the route they go to. So I think the first thing first is that government agencies, government, international bodies should start looking at funding health tech entrepreneurs with flexible funding. Flexible funding gives room for better innovation, and it gives room for better things to be done. So I think that is the area I'm going to come from, because one of the things I've come to realize is, and if you do a survey around a lot of entrepreneurs in healthcare, they would always tell you that one of the things that really has been able to make them that's able to keep them where they are is because of the fact that there's no available flexible funding available to them. They have to keep jumping from one application to another application to get funding. And before you know that, it doesn't give room for you to have enough time to innovate. It doesn't give room for you to have enough time to do a lot of great work that will make your company scale. And the other thing I would also like to talk about, which is very important, is partnership. I think health institution or health agencies in each country should look at how they can partner with local health innovators. So, I mean, maybe in a year, each of their budget to go directly to local health innovators, in which maybe someone in the maternal health space, maybe someone in the infant health space, maybe someone in telemedicine, maybe someone in the pharmaceutical area. Like, there should be a room for partnership, because with more partnership with local innovators, they can be able to achieve more. So these are the two areas I think can be really affecting entrepreneurs in Africa, especially healthcare entrepreneurs, to scale. And if these two things can be done, I think more better innovation will come, and more entrepreneurs in the healthcare space and more healthcare companies will scale better.
Thank you very much, Adorani. Very important points. Flexible financing, partnerships, these are key, and absolutely agree with you. So we move to another entrepreneur on the panel, Dr. Robert Karanja. Robert, what are you seeing? In addition to your own businesses, you're also president of this entire SME ecosystem in Kenya. So what are you seeing in terms of challenges on your end? Dr. Robert?
Thank you so much, Abdu, and it is a pleasure for me to join my fellow panelists for this conversation. There is a lot. So what I do is I literally work at the interface of the science, the health system, because Vilgro is a health sector incubator, and at the interface of venture capital. And what we basically try to do is to see how do we take an innovator like Adereni, and he's, I think, articulated in a very eloquent way the challenges of being an innovator in Kenya or in Nigeria, South Africa, anywhere, that you literally face this valley of death. So the issue of funding is really a huge issue. And we need to be able to understand what kind of funding does the entrepreneur need, what kind of funding does an innovator need. So health is quite interesting, because the health sector is not like fintech or other sectors. We are regulated in everything we do. The regulation starts from research, where even in your research, you need to have ethical approvals, all the way to product development. You're trying to build out a dossier for the National Regulatory Authority. And then ultimately, you still then now to start to address the market. You need to figure out, how do I generate demand? What are my channels to market? And I think we have challenges all across in everything that we're doing. Nazim has talked about the regulatory issues. And I think even from Stephanie, I really liked what she said about you looking at things like blended finance, so that we can be able to actually ask ourselves, how do we get the right kind of capital that innovators need for innovation to happen? So to me, I think there's a really big need for the right kind of capital. I think what we need on the continent right now is adopting innovative financing solutions. Blended finance is one of them. We are also experimenting, for example, with results-based financing, asking how can we be able to do an impact bond, for example, in order to organize the ecosystem. Because one of the challenges that we've seen is that you cannot talk about health innovation as a silo. Actually, we need to have this conversation as part of health systems conversation. What are we talking about? How are we going about improving the national health systems? And the reason I say that is because when you go back, you pull, if you zoom out quite a bit, the first challenge you realize for Africa is that it's a neglected market. We're literally only, 3-4% of the global pharmaceutical market. When it comes to medical devices, we're probably around 2 to 3% of the global medical devices market. So nobody is actually, so the established industry is not serving the continent. So Africa has got no choice but to innovate. Africa has got no choice but to actually build its own industry, and the startups are the way to get us there. So the second thing that we also need to appreciate is that as we do so, we need, every investor, when I wear the VC hat, what you see is that every investor is asking, where is the market? So for you as an innovator, you're here trying to figure out, how do I get all this R&D, generate all this data for regulatory approvals, generate data for market, to be able to penetrate the market. And the challenges that we are facing are, in most cases, the market is, number one, very fragmented. So when you're talking to the private sector, it means that your customer acquisition cost is way through the roof. And if you look at where the market is consolidated, which is the public health sector, we again have another challenge. We are so dependent on donor funding that the procurement system of our national health systems is driven by donor funding. So if we don't change the mindset within the donor community on how we go about sustainable investment in health, we have a challenge, because they're telling countries like Nigeria, like Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, hey, you guys are now LMIC. We need to be winning you off aid. But then how do you win us off aid if you don't enable us to build our industry and our base for technology innovation? And how do you do that? It's by creating inclusive procurement systems. So that if I'm building a solution, for example, let's say it's a tech solution for cold chain, for vaccines, the key people that are going to be critical for the adoption of that technology is usually not my government. Literally, we go into it thinking it's your government, but what you find is that behind the scenes, there's an entity like Gavi or UNICEF or somebody who their procurement system is not even happening on the continent. You probably need to be in Geneva. You probably need to, it's very high level discussions. So, and then again, the sales cycle is super long. And what are they going to ask you for? They're going to ask you for data. They're going to tell us, why have you done this pilot? Okay, then you do this pilot and then they say, hey, that was only one kind of region. Have you tried in multiple kind of situations? And who's funding all of this? So to me, I think for what I see in terms of health innovation is really need to have much more of a systems thinking as you come into this. It's a bigger discussion than that of the entrepreneur, the innovator, and investors. It's actually a bigger discussion based on the fact that we are serving an underserved market that really needs to build its industrial base, really needs to build its innovation base. And this innovation base needs to be nurtured by the key stakeholders, which is government, it's the donors, and all these multilateral agencies that are working in the health space, because they're the ones who, when I look at it from an entrepreneur perspective, I call it you skew the market. So I'm providing solution X, and you come with alternative substitute B, C, and you flood the market, give it for free, or you bring it at a subsidized rate. I was never consulted. I'm too small to be seen. So those are the danger signs that makes innovation stall, because investors need to understand, is there a market? What is your route to scale? And how can you do so when you're operating from Nairobi or from Lagos or from Kampala, and half of the decisions are being made in Geneva, being made in Washington, DC, being made in different parts of the world. And we are trying to contribute to that same space. So that's kind of the big dilemma. So two things for me, we need the right kind of financing. And then the second thing, we really need to speak to market formation, because those are things that are beyond what the entrepreneur or innovator can do, but it's what we can be able to achieve and address at a forum like this, keeping in mind that we have great solutions coming up from people like Adereni and so many others across the continent that are going to serve that unattended market. I'll stop there and just allow for my colleagues to also weigh in.
Thank you very much, Dr. Robert. Really, I like this conversation because we already, in addition to identifying the challenges, I think that all panelists have also gone ahead to really start thinking about what policy changes, what kind of solutions we need to make this happen. Let me now turn on to Dr. Chukwumerije Onye-Noha. I left you for the last for a good reason. You are a 30-year veteran of the pharmaceutical industry. You've seen it all. So from where you sit, what is happening? What are the challenges that you've seen? You built a company in Lagos, but I know it's not easy. So what do you see from your own end, Dr. Chukwumerije? Dr. Chukwumerije, we cannot hear you. Are you muted?
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, so in addition to building a company, I also teach in some universities. So I interact with a lot of people. And the challenges I see are that there's misdiagnosis of diseases. People tend to go to all these diagnostic labs because it's more expensive and time consuming to go to the doctors. So they go to a lab, and most times they come out with malaria and typhoid. And I've seen students, people die because they were wrongly diagnosed. So that brings up the point of technology to introduce, I'm sure they have a lot of them in Africa, rapid diagnostic devices that can be affordable to a lot of people. And also, after that, then what about medicines that people take? There are a lot of fake medicines in the marketplace that people are taking. So people die from misdiagnosis and also from taking the wrong medicine. So with innovators like Abiodun, they can come up with these things. And based on my experience in the industry, they can be provided the necessary support with regard to regulation, quality, and so forth that they need to put their products in the marketplace. For instance, Janet, I don't know what the African Union is doing in terms of pulling together the natural resources, the human resources that we have, people like me, others all over the place that have different skills that can help these innovators in their various expertise area. I'm a quality expert, I'm a compliance expert, and Nazim has his own expertise so that we can, on a volunteer basis, do this. I was going to be sent by PATH, P-A-T-H, to Senegal at the vaccine plant to assist on a volunteer basis to help them in their pre-qualification for the WHO. But because I don't speak French, so I couldn't go. But something like that could be arranged to help all these innovators in bringing forward their products so that they can take them to the market and scale up easily. Because you're not going to sell that product if it doesn't have the right quality, if it doesn't meet the standards. Dr. Karanga was talking about that, about the regulatory environment. So you're not going to sell a good product if you don't have the right quality around it. So a team of volunteers can be brought together, apart from the funding that is necessary that other people have spoken about, but with regard to expertise in different areas to produce and scale up a product, technology transfers, and so forth. We have people, volunteers that can come up from within Africa, that live in Africa, that live in North America and all over the place, that can be pulled together to assist the innovators. Okay.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Abdu, through you, Chair.
Yeah. Yes, please, go ahead.
So through you, Chair, the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, has got a certain initiative called 100,000 SMMEs. This initiative seeks to support up to 100,000 SMMEs. And we would be quite excited to hear from you, Onyenoha, what you can be able to do. So we will put you, I will link you up with my colleagues who are working in that space so that you can be able to see the various bodies that are there and what they need to be supported with. Most of the support work is related with skills development. So it would be nice to link you up with that team so that you can be able to know what SMMEs have registered on the platform, how you can be helpful to them, to the department concerned in delivering the skills to that group of SMMEs. They are looking not only at the healthcare sector, though, so across other areas of entrepreneurship across Africa. The target is to reach 1 million by 2025, I think, or 2030. I'm not so sure, but that's a good area to talk to my colleagues about. So I just wanted to raise that about what it is AU is doing regarding that.
Abdu, may I just come in on what's just been said? I completely agree with both Janet and Dr. Chukwumaraje in terms of skill development. From my own personal experience working with real smart innovators, there's no doubt there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of intent, but I've discovered that most of them are very, very strong technically, because obviously they're working on devices, etc., working on the digital side of things, but they really lack, and because they're young, they really lack commercial experience. And I realized that a lot of my mentorship is to do with how do you take a product to a market and what are the kind of barriers that you've got to overcome. It comes back to what Robert was saying, what is the market? How do you define the market? Because classically in our region, you just can't go and buy an audit which will tell you what this market is, So you've got to find other innovative ways of doing that. So I've always felt that some sort of mentorship program, which this 100,000 SMEs sounds like that, Janet. I think that's an excellent idea. But then again, we've got to figure out how do we bring that mentorship program down to the regional and then national levels. And I know again from experience, I have lots of colleagues, very smart people who have they're towards the end of their career. They would love to get involved with young dynamic groups and try and help them out. And of course, this is all done pro bono, as I do, really. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Hello? Go ahead.
Hello?
Hello? Hi. Hello? Yeah. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, Abdu, we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. So Nazim, thank you for jumping in. I know that you wanted to do that. Can I move you on then, Nazim? Also, just let's talk about the readiness of the health systems in African countries. What do you see? What do you think? What are your observations in terms of the readiness of the health system overall across the continent?
Wow, that's a question which will require a whole day's discussion. I think, to be fair, there's a lot of work going on. Lots and lots of organizations are involved in strengthening the health systems. But we've got some big issues. We still have some big issues. I can only sort of talk for the region that I'm familiar with, which is the East African region. I mean, the first issue we have is that, and it was touched on earlier on, is we don't have enough nurses, enough doctors, particularly if you go out in the rural areas. They're, people are being treated with RDTs, which are perhaps not very accurate. There's a huge amount of misdiagnosis. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, again, when I was running a pharmaceutical company in Uganda, we discovered that every day there were 10–12% of our people were claiming to have malaria and staying at home. We brought in a nurse in a clinic and realized that the vast majority were misdiagnosed. Just because they had a bit of cold, bit of fever, it was already considered malaria. And then to make it worse, they would go and demand an SP or a malarial tablet from a pharmacist who also wasn't a pharmacist, right? So there's this whole circle of misdiagnosis, inexperience, lack of experience. Honestly, I would find it very difficult to be a Minister of Health because the challenges are so big. So as a country, you've got to say, look, we will focus on this area, but then create partnerships with other organizations who can develop some other areas within the whole supply chain of health system. So I'll stop there because I'm sure all our panelists have their own experiences. So there isn't a single answer, Abdul. We have a long way to go. We have a long way to go, but there are lots of things going on. So, so it is very dynamic. I'll stop there for the moment.
I could jump in there, Chair.
I think he's having challenges. Maybe you should just go on.
Yeah, Janet, go on.
Yeah, so when we talk about the health system, we're actually talking about 6 things, according to the WHO. We're talking about the human resources that work in the health system. We're looking at the information, how it flows in terms of data and what is informing what we're doing. We're looking at the financing aspect. Who is financing what in the healthcare system? We're also looking at issues related with products, the diagnostics, those ones used for therapy, for treating, those ones used in the prevention of diseases, and so on and so forth. We're also looking at issues related with governance. How is the healthcare system governed? So it is really a question of the ministries in charge of health to make sure that there is a systematic and systemic approach to addressing challenges of across these various pillars that build the healthcare system. And there are opportunities across all of those for entrepreneurs, but if we do not ready this field also for the entrepreneurs to be able to provide solutions, then it becomes problematic. Already you're talking about these as challenges, but they are also, to entrepreneurs, they are also opportunities for business. So where you find a gap, we definitely would be looking to creating a solution, and then other sectors outside of health can chip in. Particularly your challenges as entrepreneurs have been hearing are really not so much the healthcare system itself, but rather those other support ministries, like those in charge of finance and investments, those in charge of planning, economic development, and those in charge of infrastructure, energy, the expensive infrastructure to get from one place, one clinic to another. So all of that is sometimes outside of the health ministry, but it's a quite important thing to look at when we're trying to find solutions for entrepreneurs, and also entrepreneurs trying to find solutions for the healthcare system. I think that's where I felt I needed to intervene at that point. I don't know if Mukhtar is back or if we can continue the conversation.
I'm back. Apologize about that. looks like we need serious innovation in terms of internet connectivity as well as we do healthcare. So I apologize for that. So Robert, I see your hand. You want to come in to address maybe perhaps the health system issues. So please go ahead.
Absolutely, thank you. I think I'm always very passionate about health systems development, and I think to me the short answer to the question is our health system is just super ready for innovation, and I'll tell you why. Initially I told you we really are an underfunded, underattended market. We are a neglected market. The reason being of the perceived low purchasing power. So the established industry players, big pharma, in fact, the entire biopharma and also the med devices, in vitro diagnostics, all of them will typically cater for the countries that can pay a premium. US alone is 50% of the pharma market, compared to us, 1 billion people plus, and we're doing 3-4%. We actually hide the fact such that when you read the industry reports, we hide that fact so much that you'll never come across that figure. They always put Africa with Middle East. Why do they do it? Because it's embarrassing. So to me, the issue of how does this play to the readiness of the health system? What I need to say is this in a very short way. When COVID started, we actually did an assessment of how ready are we to cope with COVID, and the answer was very clear. The health system is very underfunded. It has not been, we have not had any major investments happening for several decades. And so the big fear was that COVID was going to come, and we were the doomsday scenario. And we've been very fortunate that just the other social contributors to health have actually made the dynamics different from what had been forecasted. But nevertheless, it's really important to highlight that we are in a very advantageous position because we lack any legacy investments that hinder adoption of new technologies. So that basically means that we can come in and it's not even leapfrogging. We literally take advantage of how the fourth industrial revolution is panning out, of biotechnology, and all of this amazing developmental progress we've made in the sciences and technology space, and plug that into our health system with literally no hindrance. The worst scenario is when we do what we tried to do in Kenya a few years back. There was a program called Managed Equipment Services, where we basically said, we have a fairly dilapidated health system. Why don't we just get off-the-shelf solutions, talk to the top med device manufacturers across the world, and told them, we want you to bring us your best equipment. We're going to kit out 92 hospitals across the country. And I mean, it was a very well designed, very well intended program to make health accessible to the population. And it actually failed. And the reason it failed is because, as I said, when you're not the target for innovation, the top line products out there, when you bring them into our low resource settings, the barriers for their adoption, the installation, their use, the after sales support, the systems that are supposed to be put in place, well, it was such that the project never really took off. In some cases, they needed to literally even change the electricity supply that comes to the health facility to even get the equipment to work. So it basically goes back to the fact that not only do we have to build our own industrial innovation base for the health sector, our health system cannot work with what's already out there. So the best X-ray, CAT scans, whatever technologies you're talking about, if you try to put a plug and play, take them from the US, come and plug them in a country like Kenya, they will fail. So that's one thing. Then the second thing I wanted to highlight is, let's look at the pharmaceutical space. Let's look at the biopharma. Right now, our understanding of the human genetic code is what's going to be driving the innovative space in the pharmaceutical sector for the next so many decades. We can already see that taking place in cancer drugs. Now, when you come back to today and you ask yourself, not only are we facing, again, we are a neglected market, 3-4% of the global market, we are now being so pushed out to the margins so much that I'm scared of our innovation security. I stopped talking about drug security. I'm now worried about, are we even in the landscape in terms of the innovation space? And the reason I'm worried is because when you look at all the genome-wide studies out there, all the data we have on the human gene pool, the African ethnicity group, I mean, we're literally about 2% of the entire database we have across the world in terms of the human genomics. So who's developing drugs for us? Who's developing vaccines for us? Who's developing diagnostics for us? Who's developing biologicals for us? Do they even have the scientific basis on which to innovate? We need to fill that gap. So to me, I think we need to come back to the position of, as Africa, we read it as a glass half full or glass half empty, and let's take the half glass full approach. And then, as I close, the last thing I want to point out is the amazingly rapid pace of investment on the continent. In 2019, we saw the venture capital investment on the continent at hitting about $2.02 billion, according to some of the market reports. And that was like over 70% year-on-year growth from 2018. 2020, it actually took a bit of a dip because of COVID, but this year, 2021, we're already at $3 billion plus, and the year is not yet done. The World Economic Forum was actually telling us by 2023, not 2030, not 2025, 2023, we'll be talking of $10 billion of venture capital investment hitting the shores of Africa. So my question is, what do we need to do in order to make sure it doesn't just go to fintech? It doesn't just go to, so my question is, in essence, what is fintech doing so well that attracts so much investment? And how can we learn from that, from the health sector, and make sure that we position the health sector to also benefit from the growing investment that's, being able to attract the investment to the health sector in Africa. So to me, I think that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, because to me, the health system is just ripe for innovation. We have an amazing talent base. This cannot be said enough. We really have strong scientists, strong engineers. We have great techies. So the fourth industrial revolution is here, alive and well. The life sciences R&D has been Africa's most developed sector in terms of the R&D for the last so many decades. If you look at the World Bank reports, if you look at the AFDB reports, if you look at the reports in the national, the NEPAD reports, you realize it's health and agriculture that we've invested the most in terms of R&D, scientific base. But then where is the return on investment for that investment? So to me, let's look at it at a glass half full. Let's realize the wind is really in the sails. We are going in the right direction, but we do need to also make the health sector competitive. $10 billion are going to be hitting this continent either way. How much of it ends up in health depends on you and me and making ourselves competitive, because it is a competitive market space.
Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Robert. Really, very, very positive news. Sorry, was somebody trying to
can I go on?
Yeah, please go ahead, Adarani. Yes, you're looking for money, $10 billion hitting the continent in the next by 2023. Is that the kind of money you're looking for? You're looking for flexible financing and to address Robert's challenge. What do you do? What do people like you need to do to make sure that it doesn't go to other sectors? Not that other sectors are not as important, but I think that it's important also to get a piece, a large chunk, at least in the healthcare space. So you have the floor.
So honestly, I really agree with everything Robert has said today. But, one of the reasons, I think one of the major challenges why a lot of people don't think healthcare is investment worthy, let me use that word, is because most of the time they believe healthcare, what we need is aid. What we need is aid funding. And that is where the major problem is, because a lot of investors feel that if I invest, a normal investor wants to make money, right? And most of the time when they want to make money, when they invest 0 naira or 2 naira, in the next 4 years, they want to see that there's like 200x, 400x on their funding. And there's a normal perception in Africa that people don't actually have money to pay for healthcare. which I believe is not true. No, which I believe is partially not true. There are really a lot of people that can really pay for healthcare. But I think one of the ways we can look at this in which healthcare can get more funding is, there was an approach Google introduced in 2019, which I want to talk about here. So Google started a project in which they started bringing scientists and health innovators together to build products, to build solutions. And over the last 2 years, which also I'm actually part of this program, they've seen a lot of new innovations coming up, a lot of new technologies coming up that are actually investment worthy. And I'll give you an instance. Robert was talking about the fact that in the last 2 years, last year, we had like 2 billion coming into Africa. The chunk of healthcare startup that got that funding are startups that had scientists and innovators working together. I will give you an instance, 54G. 54G is run by a PhD student and an innovator. That's one of the biggest healthcare companies now that have raised good funding. So I think one of the ways we can start looking at this is how can, and I think Ms. Janet, you can also look at this, in which how can African Union start programs in which scientists and innovators in the healthcare can work together to spring up better innovations that can attract funding and that can actually be commercialized. So I think these are the ways we can start looking at these things, and this will actually lead to more investment coming to healthcare. I'm 100% sure of this, because most of the time when you look at the fintech space, it's still the same thing, but it's still the same. Sometimes you look at the same, when there's always heavy announcement about funding about fintech every day. And when you look at it, you see that it's still the same kind of innovation that is getting funding. Paystack, Flutterwave, what's the difference? They're doing the same thing. Brass, I've forgotten the name of this startup too. They are doing the same thing, and they both raise good funding because investors have found it that they can be commercialized and they can get return on their investment. Healthcare space need that kind of innovation. I don't think innovators should work in isolation. Innovators should start thinking about partnership with scientists, with good health organizations that can work together to build solutions that can be commercialized and that can be investment attractive. Thank you.
Allow me to just jump in real quick and say thank you so much, Adirene, because that's been the biggest thing I've always said, that we do need to get a convergence of the two knowledge bases we have on the continent. The first one is where the scientists, the academia sits, and we know they're very siloed. You know, whatever they do, nothing actually gets out of those labs. But we have this another amazing knowledge base, that's the innovation, the startup, the tech community that are very well linked to the financial markets. And if we could get a convergence of where the biotech, you know, the traditional knowledge base of academia and the innovators in the startup ecosystem can actually meet and actually collaborate, that would really change the game in a big way. So I totally agree with everything you're saying.
Maybe let me just jump in also again, sorry. Our chair has been overtaken.
Yeah, after this.
Yeah, so let me speak to the importance of collaboration and the importance of having a sort of regional hub for innovation. We currently have that conversation. It's not a new conversation, but the establishment of regional innovation hubs has been on the radar of the AD and NEPAD for quite a while now. So we need to just make sure that these regional hubs are actually operational. So at the East African level, I think there is a regional hub conversation being going on, the regional innovation hub going on. It would be good to talk more about this and find out how those entrepreneurs that are involved in engaged in East African space can benefit from those type of regional hubs. I also understand that there is a regional health financing hub. This is a decision that was made some years back, 2019. And now we're engaging private sector to ensure that when the regional financing hubs are established, that the monies go where they need to go. And we can also not only use private sector to mobilize monies, but also to work out the solutions, to support in the implementation of health solutions. So the establishment of health regional hubs, the establishment of regional hubs for innovation are conversations that are ongoing currently. And I think they would be very beneficial in scaling the work that innovators are doing in the healthcare system.
I'd like to jump in.
Yes, please, Doctor.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in.
So yeah, just step back because I like the interaction. I like the fact that people are bringing out points and people want to respond. So this is really very helpful discussion.
Yeah.
That's the whole essence of the dialogue. Yeah, go ahead, Doctor.
Yeah, I'm in support of what Biodun and others have said with regard to partnering innovators, partnering with the academics. Because I teach in universities, we do all this research, but we just publish and nothing happens. We discover all these things that can treat wounds, that can treat diabetes, but it doesn't get to the shelves. Another point I want to raise is a low-hanging fruit. We've been talking innovation technology. You know that in Africa, maybe it's only South Africa that produces API, active pharmaceutical ingredient. Maybe it's only South Africa. All the active ingredients we're using for paracetamol, aspirin, everything is either from India or China. A low-hanging fruit is for somebody to start producing our active pharmaceutical ingredients. If you don't have that vertical integration, you're making your actives, you're making your drugs, you have your components, then that's why drugs are expensive in Africa. So let's look at that. Another challenge, I don't know whether Janet discussed this already, why investors may not be interested in Africa is the regulatory agencies. How strong are they? Strengthening the regulatory agency is very important because I'm a WHO consultant. I've worked with regulatory agencies. I have trained them. They have shadowed me. I think we need to strengthen our regulatory agencies. Maybe there's something happening in the East African area, South Africa. I don't know whether anything is happening in ECOWAS region of such areas. So that's one thing that we need to do because your investors want to know that you're going to make a good product that's going to be approved by the government. So that's an area that needs to be looked into, and also retaining a skilled workforce. There's a lot of brain drain now going on in Africa. Canada opened their doors. Everybody, all my students they call me, oh, I'm now in Canada. I'm not, everybody's in Canada now. People are going to the UK. One just called me in Texas. Everybody's leaving. My best students are leaving Africa. So that's another thing that needs to be reviewed because we are discussing all these fine things, but who is going to run the factories? Who is going to run the things? So we need to review, how do we keep our talents within Africa? Thank you.
Very, very helpful. And while we are at it, Doc, since you're the pharmaceutical expert here on the panel, just one last question to pose to you before maybe we go to the concluding remarks from everyone. How can we work with pharmaceutical companies? What can we, how can we work with them? Like global pharma, how can we get them to support healthcare entrepreneurs and innovators in Africa? Is there some form of partnership? People have talked about partnerships. So what kind of partnership do we need? Because, it's also to create a win-win scenario and solutions for everyone.
That's a very important thing. If you have a good idea, the pharmaceutical companies are going to be interested in you. What's happening in the developed world is that people now form small companies and develop a new drug, and these big companies see it and they pay billions for it. So in Africa, if you have a good product that you can package and present that it works with all the data that's required, Now you need experts to help you to package that in a way that when you present it, it's going to be okay. You know, I've been talking about quality. Data integrity is a big area in the biopharmaceutical world, which means whatever data you present to me, you better be accurate with it. So that if you're going to now present your work to all these big pharma that are looking for good molecules to work with, because big pharma they don't do a lot of good science anymore. Small companies that are doing a lot of work, biotech companies. I think Dr. Karanga was talking about the genome system. All these small companies are doing it, but the big companies have the money. So in Africa, if you have a great product that has potential and you can prove that your data is accurate, then we can move forward and talk to companies.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, can I just come in? Would you mind?
Yes, Nazim, come in. And then while you are at it, what I want to do is, because we're already 15 minutes to the end of the session, we've also promised to give the members of the audience maybe about 10 minutes to ask questions. So in 1 minute, quick response, but also just a wrap up from you. I know that people have put on the table various solutions and so on. So the last question I want to pose, that I expect 1 minute, each of the panelists, please, to respect the time. What systemic changes, what policy frameworks, what do you need to see from government? And again, you know, many ideas have been put on the table already, but so your key takeaways, maybe top 2 things for everyone. How can government institutions and policies support the enablement of these innovations, and what systemic and structural frameworks need to be put in place to keep pace with these innovations? So that's the final question to everyone. You can start now, Nazim. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yes, I'd just like to take up the discussion we were having in terms of working with multinational companies. At least in my experience in East Africa, one of our biggest challenges is, and I'm now referring to pharmaceutical, medicine development, is the fact that we have a massive gap between academia and industry. And for many, many years, I used to be the chairman of State Local Association. We were working with our universities, trying to get something going. We really haven't succeeded. So you've got very, very smart pharmacists coming out of Makerere University, for instance, or Nairobi University, and they've never seen some of the basic equipment that we use in our quality labs, right? So until we fill that gap, we are not going to have the R&D that we need to develop drugs that we want. I mean, we have massive amounts of herbal knowledge in Africa, massive amounts of herbal knowledge, and yet we've hardly got any companies that have really commercialized our herbal IP, if you wish. So lots of things to do, big opportunities, but we've got to get academia and industry to sit on the same table. And currently we are not doing that. Okay, so my 1 minute, I think there are a couple of practical things that I'd like to say. I think going back to what Janet was saying, one of the problems that the companies I'm mentoring are having is that they've got to eventually go for a CE mark. Are we going to, especially with AMA coming up, are we going to develop an African equivalent to CE mark? Because currently CE mark is an expensive process. You've got to have a partner in Europe somewhere. So I think we need an African equivalent, or maybe even a regional one, of a CE mark. I think that's critical. And finally, I think, and we've touched on it, is people. Let's not forget developing people. And as I said earlier on, today our young people are very, very smart, but they lack the knowledge to convert their smartness into commercialness. And whether we can do that through a mentorship program like Dr. Maraju was mentioning, or what Janet has talked about, we need somewhere to get all these people who've had a lot of experience to come and mentor the people who need that experience. So that's where I'll stop, Abdul. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nazim. I've been told that there are no questions in the chat box. So maybe we'll give panelists 2 minutes to just address the second question. I wanted to leave a few minutes to the Q&A, but there aren't any questions yet. So Janet, your 2 minutes really summary of the key policy decisions that need to happen, and the structural changes and so on.
Mine will be drawing from just the last speaker regarding We need to keep the talent. We need to match it to the industry. Collaboration, it must be systematic. It must be deliberate. It must be intentional. It must be Africa solution-based. It must contextualize to the African context. Finance must be made flexible, long-term, affordable. Our ethics, intellectual property, regulatory systems, especially as they relate to innovation, they must be made robust enough and harmonized. Lastly, there are certain areas where we have comparative advantage. API manufacturing is not the first time we're hearing about it. It's important that maybe we begin to put some action towards establishing maybe hubs at the continental level where APIs can be manufactured, but also put around the support that is required, be it financial, be it market, be it pooled procurement systems, logistics, and all of that. So those are my few points that I think are my takeaways from this conversation.
Very, very helpful. Robert?
Thank you. I think myself, I'm happy to just repeat my takeaway message, which is we really need innovative financing solutions to be able to speak to the unique needs of the health sector and for the innovators and entrepreneurs within the health sector. And then the other thing is, I don't think the policy issue is really what we need to get right. I think most of the policy tends to look, I'm not worried about policy. What I'm worried about is the mindset and the lack of awareness. There is, I'm from academia. I spent the better part of my career actually as a research scientist at the National Research Institute for Health. And the challenge that I saw is, like Prof said, we do research and we publish. It's never going to touch anybody's life. And the questions that I started asking is, why then am I wasting time doing this if the problem never gets solved? How do we speak to the business of the science? How do you build capacity around that? And I think it also means we need to look at the business model for our academia, because there's a challenge in the way the academia operates. We need to be seeing technology parks mushrooming all over the place. And these technology parks, as I said, if Africa predominantly spends its research budget on life sciences, should be filled with biotech startups. And these biotech startups, as Adereni said, if the investors that are investing in startups in this world don't understand biotech, they really need to reach out and figure out, how do I leverage fourth industrial revolution? Because that gives a way in for an investor who may not understand the whole DNA sequencing, but they understand something to do with all this ICT, the bioinformatics to go with it. And so we do have a continent that's really ripe for innovation. The market formation needs to take place, of course, as I said earlier, and we have a lot going for us. But I think at the heart of it all, we need to appreciate a very simple fact, that we have no choice but to be humble and accept to start small. We can't wait, if I'm at university or if I'm at a research institute and I want to see private sector only in the big companies like Nazim's manufacturing company, big players, multinationals, we'll never get started. The reality is we can only start when we look at Adereni, the startup. Before they're the big success that everybody talks about, and we value that, and we measure academia industry linkages, not by multinationals and all that, but through startups, spinning off our own research. And really just saying, to me, I think starting small is inescapable, but we also need to accept Africa has so much going for it that staying small is inexcusable. We have the venture capital coming in, we have all of these building blocks for creating amazing startups, multinationals ourselves, that we need to take advantage of. So I'll stop there and say thank you again so much. And it's really been an amazing conversation, and I'm looking forward to interacting with everybody even beyond this.
Thank you very much, Robert. Adereni, I'll come to you now.
Yeah, so thank you very much. What the two things I would like to say here is, and I've said it before, I'll encourage health ministries in government that look at ways they can partner with local innovators, local health innovators in their country to actualize projects. So I know all health ministries have budget for maternal health, all health ministry have budget for vaccination. They should start looking at innovators in some of these areas and they partnering with them, and also so that they can all work together and to be able to achieve so much. And even let me even also talk about something, because the truth is that as an health innovator, most of the time you won't even get a funding from any organization if they don't understand, they don't see any way in which what you're doing is bringing about systemic change. At the end of the day, most people don't want to just fund you and at the end of the day send reports. They also want to see that you are solving the root cause of the problem. So I think these are ways I think more inflow of cash can come into health innovation. Second one also is that organization, and I'm thinking I'm Robert in this area, to stop looking at funding project-based, to stop looking at dictating to innovators that, oh, you have to do this project with this funding. They should start looking at how can we provide flexible funding with monitoring. I'm not saying they should not monitor it, with monitoring that can generate innovation and that can spur up a lot of good ideas, good innovation that can be commercialized later. And this brings me to the conversation of more partnership should come between innovators and researchers. So let us look at this in two different ways. Researchers will bring their research experience, will bring their expertise, and the innovator is thinking about commercialization and go-to-market strategy. And with these two partners, we see that a lot of good innovations will come from Africa, and this will attract good funding. I'm very honored to be among the panelists today, and I think I've seen a lot of people I really want to connect with after the program. And thank you very much, Untagged and Investment Forum, for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adreni. Now, Onyenoha.
Yeah, let me discuss a topic that we didn't bring up, vaccines, today. So that's an area that we should be looking at. I think there are 3 countries that are producing vaccines at some level. That's an area that should be looked at. There's an easier way to start, like the package and label. The product has been made, material has been made, you have a good facility to package and label. The other one is fill and finish. But with all these things, you have to have the expertise again. You have to have the expertise of sterile manufacturing and packaging and so forth. So that's one area that we need to look at. Another thing that I'm thinking of, we're having this, this is the first time I'm on a panel with my brothers and sisters across Africa. And I've always wanted to do that. Is there a forum where Africans of our nature in the same industry or meet? I know maybe ECOWAS, they have their thing, I doubt it. South Africa maybe has theirs, but is there something in Africa where people interact and exchange ideas and so forth? I haven't seen one. Because in the United States, they have theirs, in Europe, they have theirs, we attend all these meetings. I like my people to be attending African meetings where we discuss this, bring up ideas, how to mentor the younger ones and so forth, and how to fix issues. So that's the last thing I want to mention. And I'd like to thank everybody on the panel. And I'm going to interact with you all after this. Thank you.
For a hard stop, Nazim, you absolutely have to say something. I will give you a few seconds to do so.
Thank you. Just very quickly on the vaccine, there is a massive program going on between African Union and CDC called PAVM, P-A-V-M. Please look it up. There's a huge amount of work going on, and what you're saying is being developed. So I think there's hope for us in the future. Thank you. And yes, I'd love to keep in touch with all of you too. Thank you.
All right, so PAVM is a partnership for African vaccine manufacturing that is convened by the CDC and the AU, and we, African Development Bank, and everybody is there. Look, thank you so much to all the panelists. We have just 1-2 minutes to finish. I was supposed to actually wrap up and summarize all of this, but to be honest, you know, you see there is no time, but it's also very difficult given all the excellent comments and contribution that you've all made. This has been an excellent forum, and Doc, there are actually a fora where these things have been discussed. You know, the African Development Bank, for example, every year we do what we call the Africa Investment Forum, where we invite, you know, everybody to come and discuss investment opportunities in various sectors and so on. And the AU, I'm sure, and many other groups do that. And UNCTAD, of course, is a global institution. They also do those Africa-specific events and seminars and groups that bring together, you know, experts on Africa to speak. So look out for them, and thank you so much, everybody. Want to again thank UNCTAD, but more importantly, I want to thank Philip, who really, without Philip Brudas, who really organized all of this on the behalf of UNCTAD and his team, and all the people and all the various contributions. And we thank the audience for listening. It's been a really engaging 1.5 hours, and we, as agreed here with everyone, that this is just the beginning of the conversations, and this will continue in various platforms and various fora. And really thank you and congratulations to all the panel members and to everyone for all the great work that they're doing to advance the healthcare sector on the African continent. So thank you very much, everyone. Philip, do you want to have a very last word? We can close.
No, thank you so much, Abdul. That was a fantastic session. I thank you all. Very, very good session, high quality comments. It will make a report, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.